Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Damien Leone's horror film, Terrifier. This is the film that really launched Art the Clown as a now iconic horror movie villain. And considering that this film came out in 2016, Art has had a pretty remarkably fast impact on sort of the canon of major horror villains, now being up there close to characters like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and figures like this, Chucky, etc., who are these really incredibly well-known horror villains. Art has sort of skyrocketed into that group. He didn't come into being with Terrifier. Art the Clown was originally created for the Ninth Circle, Leone's earlier short film. But he sort of came to massive public prominence with Terrifier. So this is in many ways, fairly straightforward slasher flick, harkening back to the great slasher films of the 70s and 80s in some ways. You have this set of people, Tara and Victoria Hayes, who are sisters, and Dawn Emerson, who are pursued by Art the Clown, who is a maniacal and rather gruesome serial killer. Initially, Victoria is not involved. Tara and Dawn are out for Halloween, and they are coming back from a party of some kind, a bar or a party, house party, something like that. And this actually isn't the opening of the film, but I want to... Well, so I guess I'll talk about the opening of the film. We open with this talk show host interviewing a woman who has been hideously injured, and her face is basically sort of destroyed. Her face was destroyed, as we learn, by Art the Clown in his serial killing rampage. She is the sole survivor. And interestingly enough, Art then kicks in the small television, the small black and white television that we're watching this on, which is somewhat interesting because in the interview, this survivor asserts that Art is dead, but we do learn from the interviewer that his body had disappeared from the coroner's office. So we've got a sort of interesting element to that. And part of the reason that's interesting is because of the overall chronology of the film. Because the next thing that we see is Tara and Dawn walking along, coming back from this Halloween party. They're each too drunk to drive. And as they are sort of discussing what to do, they are spotted by Art the Clown, who is dressed basically in black and white makeup. He's very tall, and he has this garbage bag of stuff with him. His teeth are very sort of grotesque, and et cetera, et cetera. And he very distinctly takes notice of these two women. He sort of stands and stares at them for a while, making Tara extremely uncomfortable. Dawn is drunk enough that she's not really made uncomfortable by this, but that's more a sense of that's more a she was prepared to drive drunk degree of her drunkenness, more than she is reasonably assessing this situation. They decide they're going to go to a pizza place. Art follows them in and continues creepily staring at Tara, making various sort of faces and poses at her to make her increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, the pizza guy, the pizza shop owner, throws Art out. The two girls eat their pizza and then they leave, and subsequently they go back to the car where they find that one of the tires is flat. They call Victoria, Tara's sister, to come and pick them up, and while they are waiting on that, we witness Art brutally murdering the pizza guys. Tara has to go to the bathroom, so she ends up going into this building that is going to be fumigated by Mike the Exterminator. And he, against his better judgment, lets her into the building to use the bathroom. While she is in that building, Art catches up with Dawn. And we don't know what happens to her immediately, but she is presumed dead at this stage because we know who Art is. He then pursues Tara into the this sort of creepy, decrepit, decomposing building, where he begins to pursue her, and they fight several times where she sort of fights him off, injuring him in various ways. He injures her several times, stabs her in the lower calf with a scalpel multiple times before she slashes him with the scalpel, and then she bashes him several times with various things, 2x4s, etc., etc. And eventually he does hunt her down, and he slightly disappointingly, and this is going to sound a bit creepy, but he slightly disappointingly shoots her multiple times. And the reason that I say that's slightly disappointing is because a gun is not a traditional horror movie weapon. A gun, when you are staring down the barrel of one, I'm sure is quite terrifying. But for a horror movie, from a horror movie perspective, etc., etc., bladed weapons are much more terrifying. This is why the traditional weapons of Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Chucky, etc., are bladed weapons. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface with his chainsaw, etc., etc. Blades are scarier. So it is slightly disappointing that Tara, who puts up a reasonably good fight, is killed with a gun. Oh, by the way, we do find out what happens to Dawn. She has been captured. Art has stripped her almost naked and hung her upside down. And then, as Tara is bound to a chair watching this, Art proceeds to use a handsaw to cut Dawn in half from her crotch to partway through her head. It's quite a gruesome death scene, so, full props for that from a horror perspective. There's various other people who get killed in different ways. Mike the Exterminator, his colleague Will, who shows up later, and then a character called the Cat Lady, who is sort of a homeless woman who has this doll that she treats as her child. And they all get killed in various ways. Some, like Mike, directly trying to save Victoria, actually when Victoria shows up later. But Art ends up pursuing Victoria as his sort of final victim of the evening. And he manages to severely injure her. He kills Mike by basically just stomping his head in and just like crushing his skull in, which takes a tremendous amount of force, as I understand it. The skull is relatively resilient, and Art just crushes it with his boot. So, there's that element of it. Again, a very gruesome death. Full props to Leone for that. And then Art eventually basically hits Victoria with a truck and then proceeds to rip pieces of flesh off her face and devour them when the police show up, at which point Art puts his gun in his mouth and blows the back of his head off. We see Art's body, along with the body of Mike, brought to the coroner's office, at which point, in a somewhat inexplicable event, the lights start flickering and the radio sort of goes slightly haywire, and then Art grabs the throat of the coroner and ends up killing him, because somehow Art has been revivified. He has been brought back to life for reasons that are not really clear in the film. Why exactly that happens, apart from they wanted to make Terrifier 2. And then we end the film with, like 6 months later, Victoria is being released from the hospital, and as her parents sort of turn her in the wheelchair, we realize that she is the woman, the deformed woman from the beginning of the film, who ends up brutally murdering the talk show host. So, we've got to sort of jump backwards in time from that opening scene with the interview to the rampage that Victoria is the only survivor of, and then jumping forward in time to her recovery, and then when she is going to do this interview that opened the film. We also know that Art is still alive because he has kicked in this TV after that interview. So we've got sort of nice loop, which is a bit of a fun thing structurally here. So, what's very sort of traditional and old school slashery about this is there's not that much development. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that to sound like dismissive of the film, particularly, because I think it is a good horror film. But we learn very little about these characters. We have no idea what motivates Art. And actually, part of the reason we don't learn very much about him is because he never makes a sound. Even when he is stabbed, he screams silently. So we know nothing about him and what motivates him, why he does what he does, etc., etc. We get sort of vague, broad impressions that, like, Dawn is somewhat ditzy and a party girl. Tara is slightly more responsible. Victoria is even more responsible and studious, etc., etc. But we don't know much about them. We don't really get sort of invested in them as characters, which is sort of on the one hand, it's fine, because the purpose of the whole movie is suspense, terror, that sort of that gruesome sense of, I know something horrific is coming. And once it comes, I am experiencing it as horrific and gruesome. At the same time, we are expected to some degree to invest in Tara and Victoria, if not in Dawn and Mike and the cat lady, etc. There is some degree of necessity, right, that we actually care about whether or not Art kills these people. Because otherwise, it doesn't really matter. There are no stakes for us. But there's not a clear reason why we should be invested in Tara and Victoria. We just don't know anything about them that would really make us care about them, apart from the fact that they are both sort of plucky and more in the final girl type thing.